pretty far because your book does. I mean, so your book doesn't have much detail about what went on before Alexander as far as their political history. That's why I jumped, because again, your book does. Yes?
So Raja has to do with the...
Raja has to do with the kings. Okay, the word Raja, it has to do with the word king. I mean, they set up...
That's for the Harappan.
From what?
The Harappan.
Now Harappa, again, that's the name of the civilization. It's named after the city.
They called their kings Raja?
No, after, okay, let's be back a little bit. I hope I'm not going to. After the Harappan civilization had fallen, a new group of people called the Aryans moved in, and they called their leaders the Raja.
Aryans called them.
The Aryans, yeah, they were, yeah, the Aryans. I hope, I'll tell you what, I've gotten a little bit past these folk. Yeah, these were the Aryans. All right. Anyone else? I mean, hey, if you don't know, please ask. I promise I won't laugh, or I'll try not to. You know, there have been times I've had a hard time to keep coming to me. I recall one young girl said, "Mr. Connell, I can't think of 1,000 words to write." I said, "Well, what are you writing about?" She said, "George Washington." I about had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. But anyway, we had one girl from abroad a few years back who made the whole class laugh. And I was talking about how that in old American history, I mean, even when I was a kid, they used to have segregated restrooms for the whites and blacks. She said, "You mean they did that here?" And almost everybody in the room burst out laughing. And they know this girl's from abroad and has never seen any of that. All of you, the rest of you know that this went on. But anyway, I'll try hard not to. So go ahead and ask. All right. Anyway, Alexander. Now, Alexander came all the way through Persia, came into India, fought an Indian army. He initially won. But then, all of a sudden, now Alexander's fortunes turned. Now, you read any history book, and by the way, every Macedonian is an expert on Alexander the Great. You go visit Macedonia, and everybody there knows all about him. But a few things that he might not know is something I've heard recently. Alexander the Great claimed to be a son of Zeus, just like Hercules. I mean, you know, this you can look up. And he took on the title of Alexander Zeus. So he claimed that his father was not Philip of Macedon. And Zeus had visited his mother one night.
You said son of Zeus?
So he claimed to be a son, not a descendant, a son of Zeus. Now, unlike the other generals, so folks, this is something you never find in anywhere else. The other generals would stand aloof from the battle on a high place and watch the battle unfold below them, and they would direct the battle from their high place with their staff officers around them. Not Alexander. Alexander would march into battle with his own army behind him and the enemy in front, and he would be the first person to engage the enemy. And he never was wounded, except when he came to India. Now, again, the official history is that some Indian archer shot an arrow and hit him with an arrow and wounded him rather badly. Other persons say that Alexander was actually hit by a guided missile, and only something like that could have wounded him. And he was wounded so bad that his troops, I mean, your books will say that his troops, from the generals to the privates, just said, "We're tired of this, we refuse to march." Actually, his army got spooked. And they said, "Let's get out of here fast." And they up and left. Now, you can believe what you want to, folk. Well, whatever, the people of India, all right, they wound up sending Alexander on a trip back home, and it was a trip Alexander never finished. He got as far as the city of Babylon and died there, some people believe weakened by a wound from which he never fully recovered. But he left behind, one of his top aides was an Indian man, Chandragupta Maurya, and I'm not going to write his full name. Chandragupta Maurya, and he set up the Mauryan dynasty. And the Mauryan dynasty was what Indian rulers ever since have looked back on. That there was a time when all of India was united under one government, and this is something that nobody ever achieved. I mean, fast forward to 2014, and India is divided into India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and I believe the island of Ceylon is a separate country even. 4 or 5 different countries. And much of the time they were ruled by foreigners. As recently as 1947, the Britain had them and held them for 150 years. The Muslims took over much of their land and held it for a while. India has been either ruled by foreigners or greatly divided. But under the Mauryan dynasty, they were united. And they always have looked back on this time as a time of nostalgia, wishing that they could repeat. So they set up an empire called the Mauryan Empire that was to last a little while. All right. During this time, their caste system evolved. All right. You cannot talk about India without talking about its caste system. But before getting into caste system, someone want to pause. I mean, the religion of India is often called Hinduism or Hindu. Now, I want to clarify, the word Hindu doesn't just mean the religion. It means anything at all that has anything to do with India or Indian culture. You know, the religion, politics, yes?
It's kind of off topic question, sorry. Kind of raising my head. Is there going to be studying that?
Is there going to be what?
Is there going to be studying that?
Oh. You weren't here the first time. The answer is a firm and hard and emphatic no. This is your study guide. Your book also. I really want you to read the book, take the notes, listen to my lectures online, and they are online, even though some of you are looking at them. I can tell. They tell me how many times have been accessed. Go to iCollege, and there are links under Chapter 1. There are links on iCollege. Yes. Oh, okay. So again, some of you have been looking at them.
Is there any one section we should focus on?
I'll tell you something about the test, folks, since you got me sidetracked a bit. I just have finished making up 66 questions. Now, the even numbered ones I'm giving to the other class, the odd number ones to you. I do not know what is on your test. I mean, I can say, I can emphasize something. It's on a test, but I can't promise. So don't misunderstand. I can't promise you're going to get the questions that they. I mean, you will. Okay, I do promise you will not see any of the same questions that my morning class sees. I think all of you know the reason for that. So, but what's on your test? Honestly, my memory is not that good. I don't know. I just worked on it this morning. Yes.
So, is there anywhere to find like good like practice questions or just any additional resources?
For this class, honestly, I don't know. Now, I've taught classes for another book where you could go online and take a practice test, and to get my students encouraged, I would sometimes copy and paste questions from that practice test. The ones who had taken the practice test had a big advantage over it, but for this class, honestly, I don't know. Okay, I can see your mind is on your grade. My mind is on I love the subject, I like the material. I want you to learn the material. And if you learn the material, I really believe the grade will take care of itself. All right, one of you nodding your head in agreement, 2 of you nodding your head. The material, folk, hey, you get out in the world, maybe you'll never talk about India again, but I mean, I spent years at Lockheed, I found out I was a history major. We would get into long discussions about historical events, including what we're talking about right here, right now. And never in the history of mankind has what went on in India in 23 and 2400 BC been more relevant than it is now, because these people were shaped by what their ancestors did. I mean, today's people were shaped by their ancestors did back there. So it is important, it is relevant, and a lot of their mindset and their thought patterns are much the same as theirs were then. All right, I got off the subject, but yes, okay.
Maurya, is that like the name of like a...
It's his last name, Chandragupta Maurya.
Was he the leader?
He took over, after Alexander left, he was part of Alexander's member. Alexander left, and he took over where Alexander left, and he finished conquering all of India, something Alexander was not allowed to do.
Okay, so he was a conqueror.
He was a conqueror, and his descendants, he had founded the Mauryan dynasty, and they kept India mostly united for a few generations. And again, I don't really know how many. I don't know if your book specifies, but they kept them united.
What caste was it?
Now, what's that? I'm getting to the caste system right now. Now, about the caste system, folk, I want to state what they made a religion out of is what every one of us does in our own mind all the time. We grow up, I mean, when I was in high school, I'd look around and say, this person, he's below me. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, we do this. Oh, this person, I kind of envy them, they're higher than me. And of course, being the type of person I am, I looked at most people around me as being higher up than me. The Indians did just what we all naturally do, but they made an official caste out of it. And they put people in 5 major castes, of which the highest caste was the priestly caste, followed by the royal caste, and followed by the, not the royal, the warrior caste, followed by a ruling caste that consists of kings and nobility. I mean, they looked on warriors as being really high. They looked on merchants as being somewhat low, and then at the bottom were the workers. Now, folk, this caste system helped to guarantee that they would never develop industry and technology, because industry and technology calls for people who put their hands in the job and work, and no member of a higher caste in India was going to get his hands dirty doing any kind of work. And I will say this, your Latin American people of today, I mean, no offense to those of you from Latin America, a lot of them have the same attitude. We are aristocrats and we don't work. Well, hey, when our country was founded, a bunch of people came to our country who came here to hunt for gold, and they called themselves gentlemen because they came from a landed gentry. And they said, we don't work, we never worked in the old world, and Captain John Smith said, he who will not work will not eat. We're all going to pitch in, we're all going to work, we're all common laborers. And everybody got to work. All right, but anyway, now, at the bottom of the caste system, these are the people I want to emphasize, were the pariahs. These were the really, really low people, sometimes called the untouchables. So you don't even touch them because they'll contaminate you. The pariahs, P-A-R-I-A-H-S, the untouchables, they were the ones who shoveled the manure, did all the really, really dirty work. Yes?
So you said the first was...
The highest caste was the priestly caste, the religious people. Again, they valued religion very, very highly, and it's unfortunate they valued the merchants as next to the bottom, because, hey, folk, merchants do so much for us as far as getting materials where it's needed to the right places where it's needed. I mean, without trade, you cannot make airplanes, you can't make automobiles, you can't put together even something simple as a flash drive. And the flash drive, by the way, is not at all simple. It might look that way, but yes. Anyway, yeah.
Oh no, because I was trying to put it in order for myself. So it's
I tell you what, do go by what the book says. I think that, now if I recall right, the book says the priestly caste was first, the warrior caste was second, the ruling caste was third, the merchants were fourth, and the pariahs were fifth. I believe that's right.
yeah.
Is that somebody? Yeah, okay, some of them nodding your head. Okay, I believe that's right. I promise you that part of it will not be on the test. So, but if you want to learn it, fine, it's relevant to today's world. But I'm emphasizing the lower caste because they were mistreated. Now, if you talk to an Indian person today, he'll try to tell you that we don't have the caste system anymore. That we have, that we are trying to upgrade the outcast, and now he's telling part of the truth. But I want to remind you of something. In 1868, our Constitution said that former slaves had the right to vote. Notice I said 18. By 1968, a lot of black people could not legally vote. You know, it's what our Constitution said and what was actual practice. It took 100 years to change. The people in India, I can show you on paper where that the outcasts have been done away with. But in actuality, it's still there among some people and still prominent. Now, there was a case not too long ago where a young woman started dating a person from another caste. Her father killed her. Some of you may have heard about this. This crime I'm talking about occurred not in India. It occurred here in the United States. Since it was a crime by our standards, they took him to court, and he said, I thought we had religious freedom here. I was just practicing my religion. The judge says, we don't allow that practice here. And since, did any of you hear about a case like this? One person, at least 2 people were nodding your head, you heard it. But this crime occurred in the United States. In other words, it still goes on. Now, I'm personally acquainted with a couple from India who, one of them was from one caste, one from another. They're being ostracized by both families, the husband and the wife, because marriages between castes, on paper, folk, they're legal. But in actual practices, old ways oftentimes take 100 years to change. Now, I say by 1968, a lot of blacks could not vote. But in 1972, 4 years later, they were voting en masse. It just took, these things oftentimes take 100 years. But the people of India are working on that because they know the rest of the world disapproves of it. So they're working on it. Now, again, the caste system helped a person feel like, well, no matter how low I am, at least I'm not as low as that person. And then when I was in the Army, one of the men who'd been in the Army before, who'd been to Vietnam, but who was re-enlisting, found himself unemployed, re-up. He had to undergo basic training because he'd been out so long. So he was in our group. He said, no matter how badly you think you have it, there's always someone around you who's having it worse. Usually, there's someone who is. Sometimes, folks, you're the one at the bottom and no one's having it worse than you are. Sometimes. But anyway, most of the people of India could always say, well, at least I'm not as bad. Look at them, I'm not. And folk, again, it's a wrong attitude, but we all have it if we're honest. We all have done it. And they were just simply making religion out of what all of us just naturally do. All right. Your book goes on to talk about the family. Now, one thing I want to say about the family, that the people of India are a lot like the Chinese in this regard. You're considered members of the same family if you came from the same great-great-grandparents. In other words, they what we might call the clan or the extended family. You know, it wasn't just your, we're part of a family in our country who have the same father and mother, brothers and sisters. Yeah, that's family by American definition, by Western definition. But in India and China, they were part of a clan. In other words, you had your first cousins, second cousins, third cousins, aunts and uncles, great aunts, great uncle, all part of your family. And again, this was necessary because these families would oftentimes have to work together as a team to get a lot of the farm work done. And the farm work was often very, very tough, difficult. Now, and something your authors will state from here on out, beginning of chapter 2 and all the way to the end of the book, they'll talk about the role of women. Now, I'm aware that most of my audience in here is female. And if I start shaking in my shoes, in a minute or so, you're going to know why. But anyway, they state that women were considered inferior in Indian society. And women were generally not allowed to inherit property or own property. And that marriages were generally arranged, even though, now I had a student tell me this morning that the women in India could refuse to marry a man if they wished to. Marriages, though, were arranged. I want to say this about arranged marriages. A lot of folk have pointed out that arranged marriages tend to last longer than marriages do in a free society where that they are not arranged. In other words, there's less divorce. Be that as it may, don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way advocating that we let our parents pick our marriage partner. I mean, this is America, and we haven't done that in many, many generations. But the problem we have in America, and I was going to state, I was part of the scene, the single scene, for perhaps much too long. A lot of persons say it's very wasteful of youthful energy. A lot of times a bad relationship will wind up showing up on your transcript. And yes, I have a transcript that I've had 40 years, and a very bad relationship shows up clearly on my transcript. That you get involved in a bad relationship and you wind up deciding to miss class and whatever, or losing a job or whatever. Some of you might have some idea what I'm talking about, because it's extremely, excruciatingly painful. Let me tell you, there's a stage of life you have to go through. You can't bypass, you can't go around it. So maybe if you decide, hey, I'm not going to, and a lot of people just give up, hey, I'm not going to marry, I'm not going to have any more relationships, I'll never be in love again. Because it is painful. I mean, it's a jungle out there. All sorts of things can go wrong when you meet someone and decide to try to form a relationship. All kinds of problems can come up. And most relationships in America at least end in failure. Some of them quickly, and some of them even after 20 or 30 years of marriage. All right, but again, they decided that they would not have. Their marriages were arranged, and folk, you talk to a person any other day and they'll tell you, oh, our parents don't arrange marriages anymore. Yes, they do. They don't mean to be lying. I mean, they can show you on paper, but again, just like 50 years ago, someone could have said, oh, we allow our blacks to vote. The 15th Amendment of the Constitution specifically gave them the right to vote. But every black person knew that their vote was restricted, at least here in the South. I mean, you know, hey, I don't mean to reopen old wounds, but I mean, folk, the fact is a fact. But again, today, we've gotten past that. Now, here's what I'm really, I mean, I said this last spring. In fact, I've said this the last 5 or 6 classes I've taught when I realized it was going on. And one young girl who had been so friendly all of a sudden left the class and never came back, which I don't got when to say it. Your authors, when they talk about women, they don't actually come right out and say this in any one place. They say a little bit here, and in fact, I seriously doubt that your authors even realize that they were saying what I'm about to say. I don't even know if they do it. All right, hold on to your seats. If I offend you, I'm sorry about to say. What they're saying is, the more equal the women were in any society, the more primitive that society was. A specific example, among American Indians, the women were equal. And their society, I mean, not North American Indians, and their society level, their cultural level, was what I would almost have to call zero. All right. I want to put it right there. If any of you want to elaborate, go ahead. Your comments.
I agree with you. There's a history special where there was a Celtic tribe and they were like pagan and everything. A woman, if they did not like their husband, could divorce, and whatever she had previous before the marriage, she could still keep, and she had control of what she had to say about her life and her children. Yeah. And I don't see that in any other society at all. That's the only one I can think of.
Okay. Again, I don't want to comment any further. I mean, if you think I'm shaking in my shoes, this is one time I have to admit I really am. Hey, folks, I've got, I mean, you know, it's in your book, not in any one place. I can just look here and go to the next chapter, and read what the authors say. Yes?
Why?
Why is it?
Yeah.
I promise you. I'm going to leave each of you. To determine whether if what I'm saying is true and why. I mean, I do have some strong opinions. I am not going. This is one time I'm going to. But thanks for asking. Thanks for asking. Yes, go ahead. Thanks for asking. But I'm not going to try it. Yes.
I think women are more emotional, and when it comes to solving problems, they would have to be very emotional about it, and they end up not solving the problem really good. So that affects the economy.
It has been said that when women who have problems are much less likely to solve them. Women who start smoking tobacco are less likely to quit, less likely to stop other bad habits, whether it be drinking, whatever. Okay, anyway, yes.
I was just gonna, wasn't it in the Spartan society where they saw women as like really highly, like, because they're the ones who...
Spartans?
Yeah.
Someone sitting right near where you're sitting said the same thing this morning. All right, but I want to remind you, Spartans, we're going to talk about the Spartans when we come to chapter 4. And believe me, I've done a lot of studying on them, been really fascinated with them. I want to tell you something about the Spartans, though. Today, there were 200 people living in isolation on the mountains who claimed to be descended of the Spartans. 200. The city of Athens has more than 2 million persons. The city of Sparta itself is nothing but a bunch of crumbled stones where the people grazed goats and sheep, where the city of Sparta once was. In other words, in Sparta, more than any other Greek city, the women were somewhat equal. And I'll be quiet. Yes, I think you're right. Again, folks, the facts are Sparta is extinct.
But isn't every civilization doomed to fail? I mean, not one of them.
Well,
made it.
how come Athens so has 2 million folk?
Because it's not the same Athens.
saying-
Same, granted, I mean, it's not
I
the
mean,
same.
if you
Okay.
said Memphis, Egypt, Memphis, Tennessee are the same place.
Oh, I heard a cell phone. I started grabbing from mine. Mine is turned off. So,
Same thing.
good. Okay. Well, okay. Back to your question. Well, maybe. I mean, I'm not going to argue. Maybe you're right that every civilization is doomed to fail. Some of them last longer than others. So maybe some civilization. Anyway, I'm about to pause here.